Yeah, beautiful.
I'll just, what we're gonna do is bring that they're gonna be open, and we'll make a motion on it.
You said Alyssa's bringing the agendas?
Yes. Thank you.
Hey, Alyssa. Can you sit in and take roll?
I'm not sworn in, but yeah, I can fill in. If you need me to fill in, I can.
Well, I just want to get this done and this done, and then comment, and then I'm gonna turn the meeting over.
Okay. And then I'll be watching too, so I can get whoever closes. If that works. Okay.
What do you think?
Almost time.
Yep. Less than a minute. Yeah, just, I always do
Trying
both
to
of
rain
them.
a little bit.
Kind of sprinkle a little bit. Okay, everyone. Being 3:30, I'd like to welcome you all to our Thursday afternoon joint committee, Yankton County Joint Committee meeting. And if you would all make sure your cell phones are turned off or muted, and please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We do have a little bit different situation here today. We have, our meeting consists of 4 of our county commissioners, and each committee has a chairman of their committee, so we'll run through the agenda real quick, and then I'll turn it over to our chairman of the Financial Advisory Committee, Doug Eckeren. So, Alicia, would you please call the roll?
Don,
Here.
Dan,
Here.
Ryan,
Here.
and John.
Here. So at this time, are there any conflicts of interest, financial conflicts of interest of any of the board members?
I do not.
I have none.
I have none.
I have none.
And approval of the agenda?
Mr. Chair, before we approve the agenda, I don't know if what you wanted added, but I just would like the board to discuss all subsequent meetings of these organizations are now going to be open to the public. Is that the understanding? I know the newspaper said they wouldn't be. So, but we're all in agreement that
If that's what we
all
wanna do, yes.
subsequent meetings of both task forces are now going to be open to the public. We're all on the same page on that, correct?
Yep.
Okay, good. That's what I wanted, so.
Okay, this is also, can I get an approval of the agenda now then? Motion to approve?
Move approval.
Second.
Got a motion by Ryan, second by Dan to approve the agenda. All in favor, aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Now's the time for public comment. Public comment is a time for persons to address this body on any subject. No action may be taken on a matter raised under this item of the agenda until the matter itself has been specifically included on an agenda as an item upon which action will be taken. Each person has up to 3 minutes to speak. There shall be no personal attacks against the members of this body, county staff, individual, or organizations. The chair has the authority to enforce this policy. Failure to adhere to these rules may result in forfeiture of the remaining speaking time. Bill, can you check to see if we have anybody registered for public comment? Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you. Sherry Loest, I just wanted to say thank you for having these be open, public meetings. I think it's important for that. One question I do have is I noticed there are information here. I do request that be put on your website, just like a commission packet would be. Thank you.
Okay.
Lisa, can we make sure that happens, please?
What
No
is-
pressure.
You just-
All of that information.
We'll-
Get a
we'll
copy,
take-
scan
we'll
it
take
in,
care of it.
put, all right, thanks.
Yeah, a lot of, the information that's on those sheets is really about 7 or 8 different counties in the area, comparing what their conditions are in their operations. So,
Anyone, sorry to cut you off. You done, Don?
yeah.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, public comment is closed. At this time, I would, as I mentioned earlier, that we have each of our committees has a chairman. So at this time, I'd like to turn this meeting over to our Financial Advisory Chairman, Doug Eckren, and also would like to note Kelly Kneifel as the chairman of the Economic Development Committee also. So
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are we okay here, or do I need to?
I think you're fine there. You have a microphone and.
Okay, thank you. Well, appreciate the opportunity for all of us to come together today. For most of us on the task force, we are coming from the private sector. And so on the finance side, we know that we have some learning about governmental accounting and some of the responsibilities that the county has. Some that are by statute, some that may be by choice. How are things funded? How do the revenues and expenses match up, and where do they not match up? And so I've been having some conversations with Jeff from Legislative Audit. I'll introduce him here in just a moment. And as we've talked within the Finance Committee, we felt it would be beneficial for us to hear from the Legislative Audit Department and help give us some of that background information. And as Kelly and I talked, we felt that that would also be beneficial for the Planning Committee. And so rather than have to have Jeff come here twice to give that presentation, thought it made sense so that all of us were hearing the same information and kind of a baseline so as we begin this process. This is information that the commission has heard before. And so if you happen to watch that presentation previous, or you saw the right information in the media, you might have a feel for some of that. And some of this is information that I think we have started to pull, but in the discussions we've had, I think it would be beneficial for all of us, again, just to level set so when we start through this. So Jeff Schaefer is with Legislative Audit. He is the individual who does the audits from the state of South Dakota for Yankton County, so he's very familiar with the processes here, but also with other counties that he has responsibility for too.
Before you get started, Jeff, this idea of getting input from the community, from experienced people in the community, arose because we determined that there were some financial challenges that are gonna face us in the next year or so. And another county or two had brought in outside experts, that'd be you guys, to challenge this. Now, my preference is John and I and Dan and Myron are here to listen to you. We wanna know what you're thinking and where your ideas are. We don't wanna be leading you in any specific direction. So I appreciate all that you do, and
Is this where I start then?
Yeah, maybe one other comment. In the conversation Jeff and I have had, he's not gonna be making recommendations today. He's just gonna provide the information and the data in terms of where Yankton County is at today. Developing those recommendations is something we're gonna have to do with the two respective committees, because, and we're not decision makers, there'll be recommendations that ultimately will come back to the commission. And so, with that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff and have him, we do have some documents that are, behind Dan Klimisch over there. There's 3 different ones.
Anybody
If
need
you
some?
don't have, those are different than the planning committee's documents that are there. So if anybody wants copies of those, we do have those, documents back there.
So Doug, are these related to the audit? Or are these the one that you just handed out?
The ones that I just handed out to you 4 over there.
he should get easier.
Is this on or is this even on?
Jeff, I think in order to get you on screen, I think you're gonna have to come
Over
up
there?
here. Can we turn the camera up, Ryan, or?
Yeah, we can turn the camera
Let's
on.
bring it
I was just gonna make packet 3 and go on the screen.
What's that?
Go on, sorry.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Are you gonna use the screen? You wanna use?
I wasn't planning that, I was just, if you had this stuff in front of you, stuff, and it,
Okay.
I'm just wondering if that camera will pick him up speaking. Cause it's, in our meetings, you don't usually see
Yeah,
that
usually
tape.
don't.
So,
Maybe he has to come up here.
yeah, I think you come up there, yeah.
I understand. I'll turn this back off.
I think that's, anybody else? Doesn't look like it.
Wayne, did you get copies of these? You need copies of those. Get copies of those.
There's other, I forgot I put them on the bottom.
Oh, okay, I'll go hand out that bottom sheet to people. Thank
I
you.
was just looking, yeah, on the camera.
I appreciate that, thank you. Yep. There's actually a 4th sheet.
I think everybody has one.
Yeah,
There's a 4th sheet?
There's a 4th sheet that was the bottom of the stack.
You've gotten most of this stuff already, it's
Yeah.
already in your documents, it's just stuff that Patty sent me, and I just use it for different things or whatever.
Certainly.
But
Sam, but I need one. I'll take.
When I was digging through, there happened to be a 4th. There we go.
Are we gonna go over our paper budget this year?
I don't know, what's it, how much is in it?
Not much.
We can use the backside,
Yeah, there we
we'll
go,
do
yeah.
two-sided.
Exactly.
Okay, I say, like you said earlier, I'm Jeff Schaefer with Department of Legislative Audit. I was in, Mr. Eckern contacted me here, it's been a few weeks back, just about, just some stuff here. This isn't a presentation on my behalf, it's mostly just to answer some questions and stuff that had come up. And I know a little bit about that stuff, and then I've been auditing counties for 38 years, and so on and so forth. And we thought about some of the things that some may know here, and some may not know. And so we just thought we'd kind of get us all on the same level playing field here. I think everybody was given something. If you look on top of the report, it's called the pool and cash report. So when you look at what the county funds consist of, if you see a letter in the paper or some information in the paper from on the minutes, it'll kind of give the auditor's account of the treasurer, which says, here's how much cash the county has. That is not correct. That is and all the county's money. That's in the funds. And that includes custodial funds and funds with specific purposes. For general operations and road and bridge purposes, we're only with, if you looked at this, it would be the only 2 funds on top, the general fund and the road and bridge fund. The rest of them are monies presented to the county by peer or others tax levies that is specific for a specific purpose. 911, is for the call center. You know, jail bonds, that's for the upgrades to the jail and so on and so forth. And the large part of that, a lot of places you go to, a couple $1 million of that can be custodial fund money collected for schools, cities, townships, and hasn't been remitted yet. But it's sitting, you're responsible for it at month end until it's remitted the following, middle of the following month. And I just kind of want to make sure that we all kind of knew what we're talking about here, that if you see that in the paper that, oh, on a big day, on a big month, they might have $18 million in there, but it's going somewhere.
Yeah.
And
I
so-
think that's important that you bring up how a lot of these funds are super restrictive and that
Yes.
they can't, like the 911 fund can only be used for the dispatch center and absolutely nothing else.
Yeah, and if you look at the 24/7, just right down the line, they are specific by state law to be used, restricted for a particular purpose, not general purposes of the county. And that's, I thought that's an important thing to know. So when you're looking at here, what can we use, and for operations and road and bridge purposes, the Road and Bridge Fund also has its own money that comes in that's restricted from the state, motor V money, so on and so forth, a whole long list of different revenues throughout the year. That comes in there, and that's all restricted for motor V for road and bridge purposes. That isn't sufficient to cover your road and bridge costs. So that a lot of times falls to the general fund. And that's where that can come from to make that shortfall. And so you see oftentimes a transfer out of the general fund to the road and bridge fund to cover those services. And that's the only other place it can come from. But by law, by policy, the county spends restricted dollar first. So all the money's received from Pier are all spent first, and after that, it's money that's spent that's offered up from the general fund. So they pick up the shortfall. If you have any questions along the line, I don't really have a presentation, but I'm here to answer questions if you have them along anything. I think one of the things that Doug had asked me about was, I think a lot of the concerns of the county, or the commission is road and bridge costs and stuff like that. And without a doubt, amongst all the counties out there, that there are the tax levy raises by growth in CPI. That's been level and flat and restrictive. The costs associated with road and bridge, upkeep of road and bridge, have grown way beyond those limitations. And that's not just for this county, it's for every county in the state. That's unfortunate. And the same thing with public safety. We're stuck there. But the only way for that to change, it has to be done, a county is a creature of statute. That law created it, and all of the fees that you charge are all created by state law. It has to be done through the legislature. And there's no appetite right now to increase taxes, it's all to cut taxes. And even if they were to do something at the next session, it has to become law at July 1st. And then if it requires a levy, that would go into place in the following fall, levy for the next year. So it wouldn't be money to you until 28. So in the short term, there is no, you'll have to make do. And that's kind of what you have here. I just put this here to tell you that a little bit about that. And as far as you look at the budget here, I got the 26 budget, you all made a copy of it, and that was all presented. This is nothing new to you folks and stuff like that. And I just looked at that, the amount of money that we're transferring some money to the Road and Bridge Fund to cover some road and bridge expenditures. At the level in which you're transferring it, it's unsustainable. And you can do it this year, and you guys have all the power you were elected to do that, if that's what your choice is. And there's nothing wrong with that. But long-term, without additional revenues, it's unsustainable. And there are other things that you're required as a board to maintain, public safety and all of those different things. Those are all there too. So,
Jeff, are you seeing counties across the state start implementing specific road and tax levies? I know Hutchinson County's done it recently. I believe Stanley County and Lake County. Are you seeing more of that happen?
Yes, it's happening
Okay.
wherever they get an opt-out passed.
So I think that's important that, like you said earlier, it's every county in the state is under the same constraint. And we're seeing
Everyone.
particularly some of the smaller counties like Hutchinson just had to do a road in order to maintain their roads at a certain level of state safety for their citizens are having to implement those road and that go specifically to
Yep,
maintaining
and
those.
you have the same thing that's available here, but it has to be
Yeah.
passed by a vote of the people, or
Yeah.
they have to pass that. And that's what require you, and there's a maximum amount that you can get there can generate, but it would be, maybe 1.5 to 2.5 million, I don't, just
Yeah.
a guess. But would do a lot of, would help out a lot.
Yep.
You know, and allow the general fund to, you know, they could support it some, but not to the level at which we've had. The biggest thing you've had in the last 5 years, maybe you're all familiar with the term ARPA. It was that American Recovery Act money that came out here, and Yankton got quite a bit of that. And that was all, that came down, and I believe that's what you used most of that money for, was road and bridge purposes, but that money's done. And so it has been spent. So if you were to go back, if you look at I threw these on there with just actual numbers from the audited and unaudited numbers, and it shows where that revenue was there. And I did projections kind of at a budget to how it was gonna work out, how I see it working out in '26. I left that money out, and I said, and I didn't even use that, I just used the average of the last 3 years, because if you go back any farther than that, the inflation adjustments haven't been in place there, so it's revenue that won't be received again, so I left that out, and I go, let's just use the current 3 years and just do an average of that to project expenditures for the next year. I just did it for myself, and I kind of matched it with what you guys did in the budget, and actually, in a lot of things, besides public safety, I didn't have as high as you did, but you guys probably know more what's gonna happen with that, and I kind of come to, at the end of next year, at the end of '26, what your cash balance in your general fund would be if you guys expended 100% of what you projected, which are just budget estimates. That's what the budget is. It's just, they're just estimates. That doesn't mean that has to happen. And what would happen if you did the numbers that I projected. And that just kind of, if you look at that on the last page, it would bring down under the way in the column on the right, that's under the adopted budget that you guys prepared, which was sent out and published in the paper, that your budget, if you fully expend it, the general fund balance would be $2,357,000. And when I did kind of an average.
8 million today,
What's that?
at the end of this year, it was 8 million?
No, that $8 million is all of your money. Your general fund was $5,998,000. That's the general fund. That's all we're looking at here.
Okay.
Yep, yep. Yep, so that's.
Sure, yeah, I got you.
So I'm kind of pretty much just focused on the general fund, because that's the rest of these are kind of relying
It's really
upon-
the only money we got to spend.
That's really the only one that's kind of in play here. That's what we're talking about. And so, but and it can happen, you don't know. Yours was just a guess, mine was just a guess, but it's just something based on estimates, and that's all you have going by, you know, so, that's all I put together. It isn't criticism of any sort, it's just and if that number doesn't scare you, it's okay, but the general fund only grows by the amount of revenues in excess of expenditures. And then after that, we transfer money to the road and bridge, which that comes out afterwards. And a lot of times, in the last few years, our revenues and excessive revenues over and actually in '25, you had $1,755,000 revenues in excessive expenditures. I wasn't expecting it to be that high, so I was worried it was gonna be the 608, and that's not good. So that was the year before. So if you look at that, so I mean, it's all dependent upon what decisions you make going forward. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll take the stop, and then you go ahead. But the budget, department heads need to know that we've approved a budget. And if your budget is $400,000, that doesn't mean you can go out and start spending $400,000 out there. And I think you need to, as a board, need to consider that, you know, we've put that in there, that you're gonna buy new pickups. I don't know, I'm just throwing this out there. But when I would contend that if they come to you and have a capital purchases over a dollar amount that you establish as a benchmark, you know, that you have, do we need one? Well, we got this one last year. Well, it'd probably be okay for this year. I'm just saying, I don't know.
Yep.
I'm just saying that numbers that you put on there for budget for may be in there and projected expenditure, but it doesn't have to happen in that manner. That's all I'm saying.
And that's kind of our purpose of forming these committees, is to go to work and say, okay, because like you say, a budget is just a budget. It's a guesstimate.
It's your best guess, yes.
Where I think if we have some local business people like myself, and we can't budget that way. I mean, we have to budget that way, but yet I would like, for my business, I'm budgeted out for 5 years. Annually for 5 years. And if I don't stick to that budget, I gotta finagle and move stuff around. And we need to do that as far as the county too. And I feel that we're not stretched out there far enough.
I couldn't agree with you more.
We do 1 year at a time, but we need to get out there so we can,
You need to have a plan, no matter how crazy it is. What are the probabilities of this in 2, 3, 4 years, jail project increase, depletion, new upgrades to things, so on and so forth. It does not have cause a problem at all to have a 2 to 5 year plan at all.
and that's kind of where we're leaning to, as to where we can do that.
Yeah, Couple things I would add to that. I've had some conversations with Minnehaha County with their finance and budget director. And I believe there's a state statute that at $50,000 expenditure needs to come through the commission. In Minnehaha County, it's $25,000 by policy. Or renovation projects of over $50,000, and they've had that in place since 2009, and they are reviewing that policy this summer to see should those numbers change. And I think, to me, it's a point, I think an opportunity is that a lot of that is department heads know some of it, you guys know some of it, but as there's turnover, maybe that doesn't always get communicated because it's not in writing, it's not in formal policies. So at least on the finance committee side, I think we're gonna have some conversations about that, just so everybody knows what the rules of the road are, and not necessarily what Jerry told me, or what Nancy told somebody else about what the rules of the road are, because that's how you get some issues. And I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel with that.
No.
I think we can get some examples from other counties, and however you guys want to deal with that between the departments and the commission, I think there can be some pretty quick fixes, at least as to that.
Yeah, and Minnehaha County is very progressive with that. Over the last 10 years, I'm doing that audit right now. They're very progressive with that, and they have committees set up with local folks, and they have their say on this and reviewing their policies and procedures and stuff like that. And all of this is gonna require commitment on the county commissions, because this is gonna take more of your time, more oversight at a level, instead of saying, we've approved that budget, yeah, go spend. And there are counties like that. But I think that you need to have, that if you set something, if we're gonna be buying capital things, yes, it's in your budget, but it was a guess. Things are changing. If we have later on, we can readjust or test this again at the end of the year, but right now, maybe we don't do that, That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
So commissioners, if we went to a department head right now, do they have a 5-year budget laid out? In any department head, do we know what road 2028 would look really good to be fixed?
We do a 5-year plan for the highway, but that's per law, yeah.
That's what we're getting at. So when I worked for the school district, school buses are not cheap. And every year I had to give them the vehicle list of what's aging out, what's getting replaced. So we can, time cash. I was at the Parks Planning Committee meeting like 2 weeks ago, and Todd Larson has parks budgeted for the city of Yankton out till 2030. Some of those big purchases, and like he said, you put the line item in, doesn't mean when it comes budget season, it lives in 2030. It might not live until 2032. I don't think that's an ask. I was a director of a school district, governmental accounting. Every one of us had 5-year budgets, and we had that tool laid out in front of us.
And I don't want to say that that's a deficit on your, that it's rare for a county to have that. But I do think that it's something to consider. I would encourage you to look towards that.
Good point.
I would add, the sooner you can do that, I think the better.
Yes.
Do it while you still have cash. As cash gets tighter, that's not the time to put that policy in place.
That's right, yeah, you do this now. And some of the decisions you're looking at is imminent, and you'll have to make the choice of what you need to do as far as, and we're not kidding anybody here, is road and bridges is where the problem is. And in all likelihood, there'll be some things that can't be done. Doug had asked me one time, asked about bonding for bridge replacement and stuff like that. I did do some asking on that, and the state doesn't do it, city of Sioux Falls doesn't do it, Minnehaha County doesn't do it. I talked to the Auditor General and I go, you aware of anybody that's doing this? And he goes, no, I'm not aware of that. But my recommendation to you, if you were thinking about it, is to talk to a bond counsel and get their opinion on if you should do that, you know. But I don't know, when you start doing that, depending on the projects, you're looking at a debt service requirement annually for 20 to 30 years, probably rivaling half of your county's road and bridge budget as an annual payment. And that doesn't take care of the 30 miles in between the two bridges you just fixed. There's a problem there. So I don't know if, I don't want to give opinions, so I won't do that. So but I had the same conversation with Hutchinson County. They had 446 miles or something like that of road, of paved road. And he said, we can't afford to keep it up. I says, well, then you've answered your own question. It has to go back to gravel. Unless you have some way of doing it. There's a cost associated with filling potholes and stuff like that and maintaining what you have. Like you say, the opt-out's available, but that requires the folks in the county to approve, and you can only do with what you have. Anybody else have anything else? We want to go anywhere with anything, or?
Was there a point where county money was too free and that's why we have so much roads that need service, so many hard surface roads in the county? Or was it?
Well, it was very affordable. I keep going 20 years ago, but I was around to see that. I can remember working down here and talking with the highway soup at 20,000 a mile to put a through, and now it's over 200,000. Well, it approaches that number. Maybe it's 170, but it's a lot of money. And you can't do a lot of miles. I think with Hudson County, they just did $4 million worth, and I think it was 17 miles. It's just risen past the revenue generation abilities of the county.
Just
And that's the same with every county out there.
And to answer your question, Sam, I don't know, 25, 30 years ago, Yankton County actually owned their own hot mix plant. So it was a lot cheaper.
It's the same thing Hudson County did. That's why there's 446 miles of, they had their own hot mix plants, which needs $4 to $6 million of repairs, and they're not willing to do that. So that's why there's, and still to get the materials there, it's still gonna cost quite a little.
It's just the culture shock. So, I mean, I hear from a lot of the constituents that live, west of Utica, that was paved forever, and then now it is gravel, and so, if that is the reality, that there will be more situations like that, we need to make sure we are communicating that correctly. And that's as to why we're in that situation, because I know property owners, if they're used to being a mile away from a paved road and now they're 3 miles away, that is a change of their life. That is, a significant impact, so.
And sometimes, we can all say this, but it comes down to, there is no other choice at some point in time. This is what we have to do, what's best for the community with the dollars we have. It's-
Paved road servicing 2 constituents versus a paved road that needs repair servicing 80.
Yeah, that's right.
We have to prioritize.
That's right, yeah, and it's not personal, it's just what we have, it's, so, and that's what everybody's having to do, and it's not, like you say, but if you get an opt-out, it does help out some things, but that doesn't fix all either. Where does the increase in costs stop? So. Yes?
Could you speak to the trends that you see across the state when it comes to the expenditures with law enforcement? I guess what do you see there? Because again, this is a first glance, and 5 minutes reading through this, but I see some pretty aggressive increases year over year on each one of those line items, which have to be the biggest line items in the budget.
Yes, and that is not uncommon. I'm working in Minnehaha County right now, and they have a budget of $130 million for Minnehaha County. And I think that it's over $50 million of those.
So is this just a matter of
It is.
increase having, or is it a matter of population continues to grow? So it's not really growing at an increasing rate, it's just growing
Yeah,
in proportion with the population.
I'll give you an example of what happened here. About a year and a half, maybe 2.5 years ago, they said we had to hire interpreters for all the people that can't speak English when they go to court. Last month, we had a big charge that we paid for an interpreter.
But as far as,
We have to pay it. It's our requirement to pay it.
as far as you're talking, I'll give you some specific examples with law enforcement, right? We had the highway patrol start paying guys right out of the academy $30 an hour. So we take and we send a new deputy to the law enforcement academy, and we're paying them $23, $24, $25 an hour, and the highway patrol pays 30, they're gone. We're constantly losing people to the city, to the state, to other counties. And here's a case, Turner County, they got in an argument with their sheriff over pay, and his sheriff left, and he's our jail administrator now, and I think he brought 4 deputies with him. And then Turner County had to go around and hire a new sheriff, and they had to pay him, I don't know what it was, but it was really high. Guy lasted 6 months, left. They got a new guy in, last 6 months and left. And so we're in a situation where law enforcement, if they're certified and good, they're very valuable. And nowadays, they're willing to leave for that. So we have to be competitive, and to be competitive, we gotta pay. And then the jail, I don't think since I've been on the commission, we've ever had a fully staffed jail. It's difficult work. It's probably almost as bad as the school, Dr. Kendall, with the people in the jail, where they're very hard to deal with, and people don't like that, and they're constantly leaving. And we have to do very in-depth background checks before we get them in there. And as soon as we hire a couple more people, then somebody else leaves, so. And I haven't had a constituent yet that says we need to spend less on law enforcement. It's usually more and more and more, so.
So I'm happy to hear what you're giving us for information. That we don't, for this meeting, I don't think we want to have our own personal problems solved.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yep. And it's, like I said, the law enforcement thing, and it's like with property taxes, people are upset with property taxes, it's too high. And I know, I kind of thought this, and I don't want to make it simplistic, but if you break it down, mine is 8,000. But that pays for, if I have a fire, I call and somebody shows up to do that. Or there's somebody's raising cane out there, you call for but you don't need that all the time. But when you call, you want someone to show up and say, well, we'll get somebody out there in a couple of days. That's not what you want. And there's a cost to all that. All of these things lead to that. And you don't get that kind of service for nothing. And it's hard to come. And when they replace property taxes with something else, the money's got to come from somewhere. There will be another tax of some sort. And they can call it a reduction here, but it's somewhere else. And I was just talking with Minnehaha County, and 0.5%, the legislature approved 0.5% sales tax. And they said, that's an individual in Minnehaha County told me that they could really cut the owner occupied back, make all the cuts they required on the sales tax. But where do I go to buy stuff? I go to Sioux Falls, not in Turner County where I live, but I'm paying to cut their sales tax or their owner occupied tax. So I don't know how well this is going to work, but it would work for them if they decided to do something like that. But when it comes down to it, there's hard decisions that have to be made. So, and not everyone's going to be happy. But if you could get yourself, I think if you could put it out there, maybe have some of these meetings with the public and get the Yankton City and the people involved. It's just, we're at a point where we'll have to start moving roads back. And we're at no other point. There's no other point. So if we can't pass that, an opt-out, we're kind of begging for your vote. And if you say no, well, the people have spoken. So that's kind of what's going to happen. There's not money sitting there that's not being touched. It's not in a savings account. These are the dollars. What's shown here is what you have.
Jeff, is there a database that would show expenditures or FTEs per 1,000 people, or whatever the comparison might be, that we could compare, we can see the change over time in Yankton County, how Brian's office has maybe changed over the last 5 years. But we don't know if the starting point 5 years ago was the right spot for it necessarily in comparison, so.
You know,
How do we know that? In some cases, we may not have enough resources in some areas, and in others, we may have too much. So is there any comparative database?
I know that the Auditor General had to do something for the legislature here, and it was involving all the counties. And I don't remember what the data he was getting for them, but if it was populations, I think it was road mileage and populations, and it's just stuff like this, it's just general terms, I don't know, but I can ask him about that. I think there is something out there, I think it's public information, I don't know, it was public information it was acquired from, but I could check on that.
There was a report back in 2014 that looked at all of the counties.
Oh, was there?
I have a copy of it at home.
Oh, okay. But I thought, well, I don't know if Russ was the Auditor General. He just did one here again for the legislature just just recently. But if there's something like that, I will make a note to call and find out, and I can forward
Jeff,
it.
it was in 2023, our state legislature had a summer study on county funding where they had all of this laid out. And if you go to SDCL and go to 2023, that summer study, it has all the information that you would possibly imagine. I testified, I think John you were at, okay. I testified on it, we laid all this out and pleaded our case to the legislature. And instead of helping the counties, they cut the sales tax from 4.5 to 4.3 and we got nothing. No, that's what happened. I mean, that's exactly what happened. So there's all kinds of information, breakdown by every county, road miles, how it's allocated, full-time staff. It's all, and I can give you a link to that. So.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I know something like that because this is exactly what Russ was talking about.
Yeah.
And
Russ spoke several times because I was with that
he spoke
group.
about
Yeah.
that, so.
Yep.
He knew all about that, but if you have that, if not, I made a note here to ask Russ about that if there's,
Yep.
if you'd like the information, so.
Yeah, I think if we need to take everything off the list, basically below those two funds, the general fund and roads and bridges, we just need to verify where we need to be with those kinds of things, so we can take that off the table as a kind of parallel path, I think.
It's good.
And so, because otherwise, we and the public are gonna have those ongoing suspicions. Well, no, there's always gotta be waste and opportunities for improvement. We gotta find it. So we have, I think, through this process, part of our diligence is we have to at least look.
I think it'd be fair, just my opinion, but see what you think of this, is that you shouldn't compare yourself as a county to Bon Homme County. You should compare yourself to the Coddington counties, the Brown counties, Beetle County, Davison, Lincoln. Not Minnehaha County is kind of is an outlier by itself, and that's a whole different thing. But I would compare look at that and what stuff they have going on. I don't know how many of them have a 5-year plan out there, but I think it's a good idea. I was talking with Susan Beeman, an individual from yesterday, and they have one, and she says, I don't know how anybody gets along without something. We need to know what we're thinking about for next year and the year after that. Where does this money come from? And I think that's a good idea. But compare yourself to a county of equal size and stuff like that. And I would go through some of the things, that your departments and stuff like that is see what we're budgeting for. Is just the same thing, but is it necessary at these levels? And maybe it is. I'm just saying, be more involved. I mean, involve yourself more, or whatever you need to do, so.
Is the county entered into any cooperative or like co-op pricing? When I worked at the school district, that was a big deal. We had to buy everything through try to quote it through a co-op first.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, we do that.
I have one more.
Yeah.
Do counties typically have a balance sheet?
Yes. I'll explain a little more on that. This county is, some of the bigger counties run full gap, but only 2 counties are on full gap basis of reporting with receivables, taxes, and all that stuff. This county and most of the counties are on modified cash basis, so the balance sheet will only consist of cash offset with an equal fund balance. The operating statements are basically the activity on a cash balance. That's what it reflects, but to be in your annual report, that would be Exhibit 3. Would be your balance sheet, and the government-wide statements kind of put it all together. It loses some of its, it gets kind of lost, kind of grouped up, but the detail would be in Exhibit 4 for the revenues, expenditures, and stuff like that. Most of that's, well, that's exactly where this information with these two green bars inside came from. It was just Exhibit 3 and 4 in the financial statements.
Any other questions from any of the committee members?
So, I'm Catherine Crandall, I'm in the finance.
Okay.
So, what were the adjusting entries in the last audit that you had?
Oh, golly. That's been about 10 audits ago. What we typically have here is, I don't have them in front of me here, but was there a comment in there for reporting errors? That's not uncommon. You'll see some, and we go by materiality. If things are over a certain dollar amount, we just calculate a materiality going forward and says, yes, we should make this one, or for proper presentation. We have some new GASB implemented. GASB's came into place for government knowledge standards. It recognizes leases. Well, that comes along, and maybe the leases weren't properly reported, or something like that is long-term debt, and so we make it just for that. Sometimes it's equity. At this county, your cash was reconciled. I would base that on this. There's a cash reconcile, and it does. So there's no cash missing. The stuff, it was the placement of the revenues, expenditures, and some of the equity stuff. It would be reclassed. That was the majority of it.
And were those entries, from prior audits, were the adjusting entries put into the software?
Into the system?
Yes.
If they would have affected anything, if it was just reclassification on the balance sheet, no, we would give them a recommendation. It would cause that. But if it affected cash or fund balances or cash balances by fund, we would have Patty post those.
Okay. Do you audit their journal entry journals?
We go through them. That's one of our tests we do for. We're required by auditing standards to go through them. I go through all the journal entries from top to bottom, and I go through them. And a lot of them are just, motor vehicle, just commonplace. I look for anything with cash, or adjusting cash, or fund balance, or transfers, or stuff like that, or correcting mistakes like money. But you can do that in an hour. Just look through it and get a good feeling. And that's never been any indication of anything like that.
Okay. Were there any significant risks that you saw for the county?
From an internal control standpoint,
Right.
I don't think we had, everything is pretty well segmented or segregated and stuff like that. The treasurer does this, they do the auditors count with the treasurer and stuff like that, and the cash reconciles. Where you get the big question is when cash doesn't reconcile, and they're not, that's a big problem. But to me, that takes from here to way down here, if cash reconciles, and that is not a problem.
Okay. Were there any best practices in the accounting system that you thought should be implemented that had not been done?
You can get almost any kind of report out of there, but I think there's some good things. And this brings me to another question, is they have a revenue and expenditure budget records. Do you get copies of that? You can get that every month then, or once a week. At any point in time, it'll tell you what's been budgeted for revenues, and budgeted expenditures, and a month end it says, here's what we've spent according to our budget, and stuff like that. I think that'd be a good thing for you to get. I think Mr. Eckert brought that up as a thing, and so I may be stealing his, I don't mean to, but I'm just bringing it up, but he brought that up, so.
What is that report called?
So
No,
revenue
what is-
budget and expenditure budget records,
Yeah.
you can get that every
When
month.
we-
end.
when
I
we
would
start the
require-
budget
I would say
process
every
is
month
when
end
we
you should
get
have that, everybody should be presented with one of them. Patty would have problem with that.
So to add to that, something that I wrote down in my notes is get your department heads in a room and teach them a little bit how to read these reports and things like that. I worked at the school district. We got all sorts of reports. Just school transportation was $3.3 million. Got them every month, The power is if you actually know how to read it and if you actually know what to do with it. And I know Brad can say at the city, they've recently taken on a new financial software, so some more reporting, some more leveraging, so you can get information more timely and make more, timely business decisions. But how many department heads have actually been trained on how to read it, what to do with it, kind of what the ripple effects look like. So I would say that's something quickly, Budget 101 or, financial tools 101, and empower the leadership so they understand how to use them and they're using them effectively with your guys' guidance, so.
I think along with that too, is that the expenditure side, you kind of got the grip on that, you know what you're gonna do. But the revenue, when you're saying, okay, this is what's gonna fund all that, if that's funding, trending way lower than you anticipated, you have a time in July, August, September to adjust prior to year end, rather than also, whoa, what happened here? You know, that'd be a good point, that would help you out. And it's pretty self-explanatory, it wouldn't take very long, but if you know, if you'd like to go through one sometime, we could do that, that's not a problem.
Did you find any non-compliance or unusual transactions?
No, I did not.
Okay. Sensitive information being safeguarded?
You mean like your assets and stuff like that, or, yeah, you don't report capital assets on a cash basis and stuff like that, so we don't really look at a lot of the assets and stuff themselves. We look at the cash, make sure we verify the cash, get confirmations, and make sure that that is there. As far as information, I don't know what sensitive information the county would have that would be,
Okay.
so.
Well, payroll information.
Oh, that, yeah, we go through all the payroll stuff like that too.
Okay.
As far as that's all tested, throughout the audit, yes.
Okay. And did you see any errors that had not been corrected, that were not significant enough for you to write a journal entry?
Did we have some of them? Yes, we would put them down and we post them as a potential adjustment, and they'd be on our work papers and how we calculated them, but we said that we deemed it immaterial, so we'll pass on that. We'd still be, less than our materialities, so we could still issue an unmodified opinion. So that's what we summarize everything like that, yep.
Okay. So you didn't see any, difficulty or limitation that would force you to change your audit approval?
I did not, no.
Okay.
And I only did this, I helped somebody else, because I generally review a lot of the reports and stuff like that. I got involved in this because the auditor was doing this, wasn't able to do this. Somebody from Clark came down here, and so I helped out with that just a little bit. So my involvement in this audit, it was just brief, but I have been here 25 times before, so.
Okay.
so.
Kathy, do you, anything you want to ask?
I guess one question on property taxes, you know, I've been aware of different counties, and some charge a lot more levy per thousand than Yankton County does. And I know we're limited on what we can increase, so how does that, you know, if it's not?
Well, it's based on it is based on the value, and
Right.
you're gonna generate X amount of dollars. And if you have the valuations real high, the levy doesn't have to be very high.
Right.
And conversely, if the levy's low, you've gotta have, you know, the levy has to be, if the valuations are low, the levy has to be higher. It's just how to generate a certain amount of dollars. And they move things around, and so your values went way up, well, you know, but my levies went down. Well, you're still generating the same amount of dollars. Your tax bill will approximate.
Right, but I'm kinda saw when I was in, appraisals that, like Vermillion, the same kind of house, same value house, they're paying a lot more taxes than Yankton. So how does that play out?
That is not my area of expertise on that, because I know myself and other auditors, we talk, I go, what's your house go up? How much is your valuation? How does that work? You know, I go, and I still don't know exactly how this all works, but it just generates.
In 95, there was a property tax situation, and that's when Governor Janklow froze all the levies where they, and Gene, were you? Okay, Gene wasn't in yet, but, and I think a lot of counties got frozen to where they are, and then, there are levies, like he talked about, road and bridge levies, special districts, snow removal, library, ambulance districts, fire districts, those would all have different values that you'd see in the bill. So that would maybe raise those levies higher.
And what Mr. Jankel was trying to do with that was, they have wild fluctuation in taxes. We have low taxes this year, but no, this next year, we're buying 5 new school buses, just popped in my head, boom, now my school taxes were $1,000, now they're $3,000. This was to keep everything kind of, was to keep them even keel, otherwise it could fluctuate. And there were counties out there, when I first started, I knew a couple counties that were trying to get to the point in time that they had enough cash that they could operate on just the interest earnings would fund their, I go, that is overtaxation in my opinion, and that's what there was some more doing, but that's not the case anymore. But we have now is this freeze now, and they're putting a freeze on the freeze on some of these other counties, like Lincoln County, has growth of 7 to 8%. And now they're gonna freeze that at 3%. I go,
Yeah.
So now we're punishing you twice. So, and this is just an observation, and it's not, I have no, it's not, it's my opinion only, so.
Yeah. And that's a good point you bring up, because they talk about, well, growth will get you out of that. Well, Senate Bill 216 froze it, so if we grow at 6%, then we just lose that 3%. We don't get it. It's, you know, if you guys are all family people, if your family grows, your costs go, and that's the same with the county. But Senate Bill 216 really is hurting counties like Lincoln County, cities like Sioux Falls, where they're capped, and they may grow 10%, but you only get 3%. And when I spoke with Mayor Tenhagen about it, he's really fearful for the future, because that is money you're losing, not just this year, but the year after that, and the year after that, and the year after that,
And you don't make it up.
and you'll never make it up.
And the
It's
thing about
gone.
that is in this case, with all that growth and stuff like that, comes your increased cost to public safety.
To roads and bridges.
And to roads and bridges, all that cascades down, because if you have more prisoners and stuff, you have to have more attorneys and stuff like that for public defender or state's attorney, stuff like that. And if you gotta have money to pay for that too, and that's
Yeah.
taken away, and so where does that come from? And you can only, what do you do? And then, so your right to speedy trial may be, instead of 3 months, it may be 10 months. You don't, that's as speedy as we can get, you know, so that's just one of those things. And it's a thing that's, but right now the appetite is not looking for increasing, it's decreasing.
Oh, I
And so it's, so.
Is there a statute on how much we can roll over or carry over to the next fiscal year
For a county?
for a county?
No.
Okay.
That's never been a problem.
I was gonna say.
Well,
That's not a problem.
I'm sure South Dakota has one for school districts, because at the school district I worked at, Wyoming had it at like 5% of your annual budget, and they moved it to 10.
Yeah, that's what this
Which
is.
allowed us to now look at make those 3 and 5 year plans, you know, build a $4 million transportation complex and actually pay for it, right? Like,
Right, yeah.
but yeah, if there's no reason to, yeah, that's fine.
Well, and that's what part of that was, is the fund balance thing, is when they had that assigned fund balance can't exceed 40% of next year's budget. That it was, that surplus property, surplus tax, surplus cash, I should say. You'll see that we have a question, a comment on that sometime. It's just a compliance thing, it's not, it doesn't affect our audit opinion. But that law has been in place for a long, long time, and that goes back to when they could move them up and down. But that's just unassigned fund balance. It doesn't, that's just measuring that. You could have 100 million in assigned and only have 5 million unassigned, and you'd still be fine. So that's a game that's easy to play, so, but, that's where that all comes back, old laws, it needs to be updated.
Jeff, you started this off talking about general fund and roads and bridges is really the two that there's some discretion on, potentially, and that there could be a tax or an assessment for roads and that would contribute to roads and bridges that we don't have in place right now in Yankton County.
An opt-out, if you will, yep.
Yeah, or an opt-out.
Yep, that-
if you
yeah,
will,
that- yep, yep.
to that
And that's what
level.
it would be. Right now, there's no room under the current tax structure you have here, it would be, if that'd be an opt-out.
Okay. Are
Yep.
there other assessments, fees, taxes, whatever label is the right one, that Yankton County doesn't have, that other counties do have?
There is no other, that you're not taking advantage of, is right. Yep, there's no,
I can get you, and I'll send it to Bill to send out a breakdown of every levy that every county in this state has, and I can get that to you guys, so you guys know what is available, and what's being used and what isn't, so. I can-
and when the laws were passed and stuff, it's made available out there. And some of them are at 90 cents, and you know, they can't pass it at 90, but it passes at 60 or 30 or something like that, you know, and they have different amounts, but under the same statute.
And, you know, and again, for the public's knowledge, it's another tax. It's, you know,
Yeah.
one way or the other, you're gonna increase taxes.
Yeah, and that's it. Because where there are no other revenue sources currently, and I'm not aware of one, that you're not taking advantage of. So,
You know, unless you broaden the tax base with more housing, a lot of more housing, or manufacturing, or whatever.
But all those expenses with the road and bridge and structure all hit you first before that value hits you, so you'll have that cost before you have the
Yep.
revenue. You know that, so
Oh, yeah.
I'm just saying that it all comes up front, so.
Yep.
And I didn't mean to dominate anything or take anybody's place or
you're-
something like that.
You're perfect. We appreciate you coming down and,
So-
I got one
Sure.
more thing as regard, so we run a county ambulance. We're the only one in the state that runs a full-time county ambulance. Is that correct? or-
I don't think that's,
Okay.
Lincoln County, sorry, I'm saying Lincoln,
Lake
McCook.
Okay, they just got rid of, Flander took it over.
Oh,
McCook and Moody had one.
okay, I
So-
didn't know. But in the absence
Yeah,
of that, if
yeah.
there is no other option,
Yeah, okay,
I believe that
Okay.
falls to the county.
yep. All right, thank you.
And